Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Lost in Criterion. I'm John Patrick Owatari Dorgan, and with me, as always, is a man with a lot of bandanas.
I own a lot of hats, not a lot of bandanas.
I think I mentioned hats last time.
Last time it was true. This time it's not true. That's
but you
all
would
I'm
look
saying.
awesome
You're lying
in
about
a bandana, I think.
No one looks awesome in bandanas.
You would.
Speaking though of people who don't look awesome in bandanas, once again, friend of the show, Donovan Hill, is back with us because we're discussing a Japanese movie, and why not?
We only have so many friends, so...
It's true.
Donovan,
say hello.
Hello. Adam is right. People not looking good in bandanas is categorically true in all cases. As someone who has a lot of clients who wear bandanas on the regs, often Confederate flag bandanas, naturally, yes, categorically true that there is no such thing as a person in a bandana that looks decent or humanly respectable.
Fine, I'll take the hint. I will take the bandana off.
I don't know
everybody back off, okay?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hats, I think.
If you can count your hats, you don't own a lot of hats.
Six hats, maybe.
Yeah, that's not a lot of hats.
No,
there's some question. It might be a lot of hats. He doesn't know if it's 5 or 6.
You ever read the book
it
Caps
could be 20.
for Sale?
It's 5. I own 2.
I have no idea. I have no idea what Caps for Sale is.
I'm just saying, that's a lot of hats.
Okay.
I still own that scally cap I wore in high school, Adam. That green plaid, Irish.
That's a very nice.
I hope you wear
cap.
it to work every day.
I took the buttons off some years ago. That I believe said, like, get fucked Avril Lavigne or something like that, or Avril has to die. Some political statement that I had CD Jungle custom make for me on a series of pins.
You were so punk rock. And now you're a boy.
You wanted a young woman to die.
I wanted fraud. It was more, I wanted the avatar of all things fraudulent to die. I wanted the death of fraud and deception and crass usurpation to die, which I don't, it's a political statement. Yeah, in a way it did. As I recall, Avril Lavigne went about like another year with the punk thing, and then...
Then she died.
No. Yeah, that incarnation died, and she came back like 20 minutes later as just an out-and-out, Britney Spears-esque pop singer who no longer made any pretensions to being socially or culturally rebellious, and was just a regular run-of-the-mill pop star, which I considered a victory of a kind.
So we should maybe mention the movie.
All right. Today we are discussing famous moral dilemma epic morality play called Yojimbo, directed by Akira Kurosawa in 1961. Commonly mistaken to have been directed by Francis Ford Coppola sometime during the Prohibition era, and then later usurped by Kurosawa, who found the unused prints for his own film. The plot, which has been aped several times, most notably by recent television show Lost. Is that there
I suppose that's kind of true.
Is that really true?
I'm pretty sure that you could probably say just about anything and everything was aped into Lost, because since Lost didn't have a plot or character development. You could
argue it.
You could pretty much argue anything, because Lost was a great big void where there wasn't anything, because that is J.J. Abrams' style somehow, that he's gotten away with to this day, is, I didn't do anything, that's my style.
It's true.
I can't do anything coherently, so feel free to also look at these new Star Trek films. You'll notice that they are vapid in their entirety, in a really appalling way. I haven't seen the new one, Benedict Cumberbatch or no, I'm not going to see it. I saw the first one, and I was really like, oh my god. I wasn't even a big Star Trek fan. I watched a couple episodes of The Next Generation, but I saw the J.J. Abrams reboot and said, this is just really boring and way too much lens flare. And then when I heard that he was being given Star Wars and Star Trek, I said, well, that about seals off the interesting potential for my hope that they would give it to somebody. I kind of hoped that they were going to give.
Well,
you know what I would have liked?
Him one.
No, I would have liked.
They gave somebody else two.
Did they?
Another one.
I
Yeah,
thought
they
they
gave
gave
an
them all to
actual
him.
director number 2.
I would have liked to have seen them give Star Wars in its entirety to Takashi Miike.
Who did they give it to? Yeah,
if
there
that
was some
guy-
talk in the news about somebody else getting. They're giving them. They're parsing them out like one movie at a time because they intend to release one every 2 years or something
Right,
like that.
they want them all to be done ahead of time so they can just get to so they can stick to a nice tight release schedule. But
Right, and so they're giving away. It's J.J. Abrams is only getting like one, and somebody else like that. Everybody's kind of like.
Here's
wow,
the problem.
that'll be a good
That
idea.
has to imply that they are going to be wildly disconnected, incoherent films
Well, they're
because
not
they don't have a
supposed to
single
be-
directorial vision.
They're
Aren't.
supposed to take place in the Star Wars universe. They're not
Not going to be.
not all going to
okay.
be sequels to
I will
the
be-
movies we've seen. They're
Right,
going to be
I
like
will be-
extended universe basically.
Yeah, I will be amenable to
Guys,
these films
guys.
as long as I never hear the word Skywalker.
Yeah, me
Guys.
too. Actually, yeah. If I
Anyway, so
I wanna
Yojimbo
pull us
also
back
about
here. I
speaking
want to
of.
pull us back here, but I want to pull us back here. I want to segue. I don't want to just bounce.
how on earth
And
are you
we
going
can
to
segue? I can do this.
Do it,
Okay.
do it, Adam.
All right.
Do it to it.
Fun fact, guys. Mifune, our star,
My
Close
was
personal,
originally
my husband.
originally in mind to be Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That
That
fits
would've-
really well.
That would have been awesome. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's heavily influenced by The Hidden Fortress, which is another Kurosawa movie we'll be watching later. But yeah, apparently
He had
Lucas,
he would have been fresh off of that.
tried to get him.
What was the one he did with Charles Bronson? He
I
was in
can't
a spaghetti western with Charles Bronson not too many years before, like a handful of years before Star Wars would have started filming, if not roughly around the same time. So I could have seen that he had just made a big break into Western cinema. Again, in a niche of cinema that Star Wars, in many respects, draws from, notably the Han Solo character. But so the plot of Yojimbo is a Ronin, or masterless wandering samurai, arrives in a town run by two rival but incredibly petty and just insanely incompetent gangs.
Everybody is insanely incompetent. It's
Right,
really
and
amazing.
It is a town full of just bafflingly incompetent people, from the local magistrate down through the 6 citizens who occupy this town who are
we
not
never
in this
meet any
game.
real people.
There are
I'm not even sure we get 6.
there's
we get
maybe 3 or 4
We get
people.
the guy who runs the restaurant,
The guy who runs the
eatery.
store, the restaurant.
The girl he rescues.
Okay, the guy who
makes the coffin.
the guy who runs the coffin shop. Does he have an
Cooper.
assistant?
No,
Cooper. His name
Okay,
is Cooper.
so that's 2. Okay, we have the guy whose wife was stolen
and
and
then
their child,
his wife.
and then the wife. That's
And
5. There's only
Those
5.
are
there's-
the only
okay.
people we meet.
So there's a town that somehow was economically able to survive with 5 people not in these 2 gangs who are constantly
no, I guess
fighting.
we forgot. There's the silk merchant, and
There's
he
the
is
silk
only
merchant.
sort of involved.
And there's the magistrate. There's the corrupt
Yeah,
magistrate.
so there's a magistrate.
Well, the magistrate's clearly involved. He's just not
Right.
Oh
involved.
wait, are we
on
talking
either
about the
side.
magistrate or the constable?
The constable.
Yeah,
is what
the
I mean.
constable
The magistrate
is-
isn't part of the town, though. The magistrate
he just
is a
visits.
visiting dignitary.
So there's these 2. So that's the plot, is that he goes in and sells himself to both gangs simultaneously and gets them into a bidding war over his services.
Well,
after
basically because he thinks they're pretty awful right from the beginning.
Right.
He's like, "This is ridiculous."
he makes a buck. He is a extremely callous, self-centered, somewhat shallow person.
But at the same time,
There's
as
a sort
proven
of
by
the-
the story, actually kind of weirdly noble.
Right, I was going to get to
Well,
that, Pat. God.
he's
Sorry.
only comparatively noble. All right.
Yeah, he's not, this is infamously one of Kurosawa's subversions of the samurai mythos, in that the main character, there are aspects of him that show that he has the underlying nobility, protect the weak, heart of gold, samurai ethos, but it is coexisting with the shell of a unbelievably cold-blooded sword for hire who is only interested in his next handful of gold and will kill anyone and everything at the drop of a hat to get it, as demonstrated by the film's infamous opening fight scene, where he kills 2 dudes and mortally maims
another,
a third, and then in one of my dad's weird like, kind of uncomfortable in retrospect. Like, other people were learning Arnold Schwarzenegger catchphrases, and the, like, badass line that I learned as a kid was, Cooper, 2 coffins. No, make it 3. From that line in Yojimbo, where he maims a dude by hacking his arm off, and then tells the coffin maker...
Reconsiders the fact that this guy will probably
flips
not
him some coins to make coffins for the 2 dudes he just iced, and then looks back at the guy clearly bleeding out from his arm that he hacked off and says, "Nah, make it 3." Which is which sort of sets the stage for just how cold-blooded this guy is, that he just killed 3 strangers, and his only real consideration is how much to remunerate the coffin maker. And then the film proceeds from there, and we learn that while this is not an act, that he really is kind of a huge asshole, that there are noble tendencies in him that from time to time he sort of like he gets backed into a corner. He always seems like really put out by the fact that I've got to be noble. Because he's always kind of grumbling while he does these self-sacrificing noble things. So
being a giant asshole, basically all we get down to is he's not noble by any sort of like objective measurement system. He is noble only in comparison to
the persons he's around.
The fact that everybody else is an even bigger asshole. It's like, wow, this guy's kind of good. Yeah, compared to the dregs of human society, yes, he is noble.
Everyone in this movie, and obviously it's very personal. It's got a dark comedy aspect.
Oh, it's definitely a dark comedy. This is not an action movie, exactly.
All the actual bad guys in this movie are just really ugly people physically and reflect. And I'm glad that in the next one the ugly guy is a good guy. But everyone in this movie is not just the dredges of humanity, but they're physically reflective of their hearts, which is a thing that doesn't happen in real life. Remember that, kids.
I disagree.
Always. Oh, every ugly person you've ever met is terrible?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I've been doing things wrong.
Maybe that's just how it works in Japan.
It's possible. No, it's just maybe like Chris. I was like, I don't see what you're complaining about.
This film is based on reality. This is all true.
No, like what I love about it is the fact that it is weirdly an action comedy.
Yeah,
it's not. It's dark, but it's not even that dark. Like it's a goofball at times. It's it's not dark. It's legitimately like goofball comedy at times.
There are times where this film borders on slapstick.
Yes, exactly, and it's weird.
There's the scene at the end where he is transported in a barrel. Again, really, and he's taken to a cemetery. This film this film has a underlying sort of cynical tone, which is where the dark comedy aspects sort of come into play, which is, I think, is all sort of part and parcel of the larger critique of the, noble lone samurai mythos that Kurosawa is, that this movie is infamous for in the first place. Obviously, the crusty, selfish, where's my money, serial murdering, Gun for Hire is I sort of backing up here. This movie is probably one of the most influential pieces of cinema within the 20th century. Oh, yeah.
If you watch this and watch any other movie, you're like, crap.
Notwithstanding the fact that its plot has been wholesale lifted and copy-pasted into a number of westerns and even subsequent films.
Just regular, any movie, basically.
Right. Notwithstanding just wholesale copy-pasting of the plot, the Yojimbo character archetype, the gruff, wandering mercenary who, when the chips are down and when he's kind of when he's grumblingly backed into a corner, Han Solo being, I think, the most recent after this was like the big Western equivalent, but there certainly since Han Solo there have been others. Obviously.
And
not the most recent after this. The most recent after this is
the Magnificent Seven, probably, but.
No, well, with Fistful of Dollars and all that.
Clint Eastwood.
Leon's. Clint Eastwood.
The Clint Eastwood Man with No Name trilogy.
Yeah.
The Man with No Name, in part, a reference to the fact that while the title is called Yojimbo,
has no name.
He actually has no name, and when he's asked his name, and we'll get to this when we get to the
gives bullshit.
he just makes up a bullshit, I am a 30-year-old flower field, which, again, is one of those hardcore, badass throwaway lines that absolutely doesn't work in Western cinema at all.
It actually, he doesn't say 30-year-old. I ran this by my wife because I was curious. He actually says, 30-ish.
30-ish.
He says that he's in his 30s. He says he's in his 30s.
I'm a 30-something flower field.
30-something.
That's the little joke.
Rice field, yeah.
He's 30-something, and then he follows
but
it
I'm almost
going
40.
on 40.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's
when he makes it plainly obvious that he's giving them bullshit.
Right.
And that's part of the flippant attitudes. You don't need to know my real name. I'm going to give you what is very clearly...
I'm going to look out the window and just start naming things and pretend that's my name.
I am
my name is
Carpetson.
Door Carpet Window Smith.
Yes.
So there's that's sort of
30-year-old Door Carpet.
Yeah, right.
Window Smith.
So
someday I'll be 40 something Door Carpet Window Smith.
Yeah, he's that character archetype is probably one of the most, at this point, well-worn character archetypes in comics, in video games, in film, in books.
Oh yeah,
it is the Yojimbo archetype.
It clicked with Western
audiences,
cinema and audiences just so well that it's just so popular now.
Yeah,
and
so
Kurosawa gets some flack historically for being a very Western director. I mean, Western regional as opposed to Eastern, not Western.
Those people clearly didn't watch Seven Samurai, a film Western audiences don't have 10 minutes of patience for. The fact that
but
Yojimbo in some sense also is a fairly slow-paced movie.
Although Yojimbo, if you compare Seven Samurai and Yojimbo, Yojimbo was a million times more enjoyable for me than Seven Samurai was.
Yeah.
Well,
I've slogged through Seven Samurai. I didn't slog through Yojimbo.
Looking at Yojimbo, it's very clearly Western influence, and it's no wonder that it went back to the West in so many different ways. Because it's at its heart, it's a gangster movie that takes place in a Western town.
There is literally the dust blowing as he walks into the town.
The day after it rains.
And those are two very literal, those are two very American genres, the gangster film and the Western. This combines them pitch perfectly, into a movie set in Japan.
This is also the scene, where the infamous scene where, again, in some respects, looking back on these films now, not as a kid when I first saw them, I am amazed in the 1960s when, as a general rule, violence and gore in films was considerably less than it is today. This film fucking opens with a dog trotting by with a severed human hand in its mouth, like a goddamn horror film. And I was like, what in the... looking on it now, I'm like, Kurosawa got away with fucking everything. This is the early 60s, and... Not only has this dog walked by with a severed human hand in its mouth, 10 seconds from now, we are going to see somebody else lose their arm in a torrent of blood and die screaming in the dust.
Well, the weird thing about it is I'm pretty sure at that time, because I remember reading this about samurai films in general, is that they weren't necessarily supposed to be allowed to show blood. Because they used to, if you watch the films, there's a lot of cuts where there's nothing happens. You're like, oh, that guy got cut because we saw the motion, and he fell down. But then, mixed in with those cuts where nothing happens are just viciously bloody scenes.
There's a scene, the arm getting hacked off. There's the scene at the end where the guy, he throws the knife that he's been training with into that guy's arm, and there's a, really up-close shot of this kitchen knife embedded in this guy's forearm bone with blood going everywhere. And that's what I'm saying is I thought there was a
rule against it at that time in... Japanese and just cinema in the West too about blood, but apparently I think maybe because it was black and white.
I feel I wonder how much that he got away with because that guy also, again, kind of graphic when you think about it, when he throws that kitchen knife at his nemesis, that guy's arm is clearly having nerve misfirings from him spearing it through his nerve endings into his bone, because then he can't move his arm and it is just dry firing the gun into the air as he's frantically trying to pull the knife out. And then that scene ends very vividly with that guy drowning in a pool of his own spilled blood in the dirt, and before he finally dies. I forget that actor's name. He subsequently he is a Toshiro Mifune recurring nemesis in a lot, not just Kurosawa, but in a bunch of films, but also is his own. When we get to later Criterion films like Sword of Doom and Samurai Rebellion, and there's a couple of other films where he is the main character. I really like that particular actor. I think he's very charismatic.
At least in this role, he does a great job of just being that sort of like kind of ultra example of the like flippant. I don't.
He is the dark. Asshole. He is kind of like how not to get too nerdy here in the sense that Batman's villains are the best Batman villains, at least in my opinion, are always Batman turned one click more to the right down the crazy person scale than Batman is.
Right.
That they like the most, I think, best exemplified in the Batman Begins Christopher Nolan film, where essentially the only thing that separates Liam Neeson from Ra's al Ghul from Batman is Liam Neeson is willing to take their shared ideology to its logical conclusion rather than an arbitrarily self-imposed limiting point. The guy with the gun, the other Yojimbo, the other bodyguard,
right.
that he faces off here is Yojimbo taken one
well,
more, like with those little shreds of
Sanjuro
humanity that he has left.
Yeah,
taken out.
Taken to that extreme.
It is the selfish. We'll kill for food or cash,
or just because
bodyguard, without the last dregs of nobility and humanity that the main character has, like, stripped away. He is him one more click to the down that path, which is why in some respects he's willing to use a gun, because he literally does not care even about such, commonplace cultural conventions as using a firearm in a sword fight. And he's willing to cheat openly, so little does he care about what everyone else thinks of him. All he cares about is winning and getting paid.
I like how that man's gun follows a very American cinema custom of where does he get the bullets?
Yes, I know.
Until it's plot important that he be running out of the bullets. Until it's plot important that he's run out of bullets.
But then he hasn't run out of bullets,
amount of bullets.
It's pretty obvious that he hasn't run out of bullets. He just can't fire it because he's dying. He's like, I've only got 2 bullets. Come over here and check this shit out. And then, he's like, I'm gonna... it's so obvious he's gonna shoot Sanjuro, and then it's like, oh,
doesn't he?
I can't.
Doesn't he pull the trigger and it's...
I thought he didn't. I thought he goes, I can't, and then passes out.
I don't know.
I have to watch it again. I'm pretty sure he says,
Donovan, do you know?
I want to say that he, he just dies.
He dies.
He has been hemorrhaging for several minutes by that point, and he just kind of, gives it up.
He ought to be. He has a very Shakespearean death, though, so he could still, try to pull some...
Right, he does have an extremely Shakespearean death.
I'm not dead yet! And then shoots Sanjuro in the back.
Yes.
But that would be a different movie.
So, where do you guys want to begin now that we touched the sort of broader cultural impact?
We basically just done the whole thing, but one of the things I really wanted to point out that, drove me crazy, that I found out was driving me crazy for no reason, is, so, did you notice that they insisted on calling all the bad guys gamblers?
Yes.
Which isn't that really weird, right?
Isn't that when that was originally, wasn't that what the word, I'm blanking on the name for mafia or whatever it is,
Yakuza?
Help me out here. Wasn't Yakuza essentially synonymous with gambling or gamblers? Because in every single... Listen, I'm only going by the obviously documentaries that I've watched, namely all of Japanese period films. Every single Yakuza anything invariably involves a gambling scene where they're all playing the guess even or odds under the cup.
I mean, the Yakuza is definitely connected with illegal gambling and stuff.
So I always assumed that the words were synonymous.
The weird thing is that, no. Well, see, that was the weird thing. I was talking to my wife about this. I was like, okay, I need to understand why we're calling all these guys gamblers, because they are mostly just wastrels, vagabonds, and just generally bad people.
Thugs.
And then, so I was like, are they actually saying gamblers? I was like, I can't tell. I don't... They're the way they're speaking, I can't understand what they're saying half the time. And then, so she listened to one of the scenes, and she's like, yeah, they're saying gambler. Literally, just as in a person who goes to a casino and gambles.
Well, I mean, gambling leads to ill.
But like, it's a really weird thing to call people who are wandering around murdering other people.
Yes,
there's a lot of more
be their
descriptive
defining
words.
characteristic.
Yeah. And so from what me and my wife were talking about is we kind of were guessing it's supposed to be, it is definitely the word for gambler, okay? Like a person who goes to a casino and bets, okay?
Yeah.
But like, more like that they're gambling with theirs and others' lives. It's supposed to be kind of metaphorical, like that they don't give a crap about the outcome. They're just gambling with their life.
Or maybe in the last 50 years, that word has
No. The word literally translates to like gambler.
Yeah, well,
but like
literal translations very rarely mean anything.
Well, no, I know, but what I mean is like it's like when she listens to it, she's like, "Oh, they're saying gambler."
Yeah.
Like we don't think the word meaning has changed. We think that like he was making some sort of weirdly metaphorical statement about their attitude towards life. And their actions. It's just really weird because like he uses it a ton, like nonstop. And mind you, like Donovan might be right in that like he can't necessarily come out and directly say the word Yakuza in his films.
I was going to say,
bad
especially
things might happen to him.
Given that time period and given
you
like
don't
the
see
weird
at that time,
touchy relationship
Yakuza
between
films.
it's given
those
the
don't
weird
come around till later.
Right, especially the weird touchiness between the Japanese government and Yakuza
so
in
it's
general.
Definitely
which
possible that
I don't know a lot about. I know that
it.
It's really weird. You don't like America has never given a fuck about making movies about the mafia, but Japan has kind of a.
Well, nowadays they do. Like, you see them all
nowadays,
the time,
Ichi the Killer. My God,
somewhere time around the 80s or 70s, they started.
They gave up. Yeah, they were like, wait, they are not going to just come to your house and kill you if you make a movie about them. But in the 60s, who knows? In the post-war era, when the Yakuza might have actually, had some kind of presence, it may have been different.
Yeah,
but...
it was. It was just a really weird choice, and it's like hard to tell if he was trying to say what meaning he was putting on that word.
I always assumed it was because, given that, essentially, especially for that time period, any kind of organized crime essentially was just running gambling and probably some associated prostitution. The word for gambler and the word for mafia guy were, in essence, synonymous.
It could be. It's really hard to tell, though.
They weren't running Ponzi schemes in 1622. So
right. Well, but they probably were. Like, there's not a lot of new stuff under there's not a lot of new under the sun.
Right.
But they were like the scams that they run now are probably basically the same stuff they were doing then, but
they sure love gambling if every single Zatoichi film is any basis.
Well, that was just a weird thing because I don't know that at the time gambling was necessarily illegal either. It is now.
But it was just controlled by them because why not?
Yeah, it was just a weird thing that I noticed, and like kind of like I was like, "There's no way they can be saying gambler. Like they've got to just be like translating a word in a really weird way." And then, sure enough, turns out they're saying gambler, like directly saying the word gambler, which just I thought was an interesting thing. It was like one of those things that I really got like, well, it's hard to tell if they're being which kind of euphemism they're using. Yeah. It's kind of an interesting thing.
I do like on the note of nothing new under the sun, the farmer at the beginning yelling at his that kids are crazy these days.
Yeah.
Because he wants to go be a gambler. And that kid ends up surviving. At the end, Yojimbo tells him to go home.
Yeah. The surprise morality play of the end is, hey, go back, stay in school, kids. It's me, Yojimbo.
Yes. Don't do drugs. Yes.
Don't do drugs. Stay off gambling. Or whatever these guys were doing, since it's not even really expressly said what their great criminal enterprise is, because they are essentially just having ineffectual showdowns in the street every 20 minutes.
It seems to be like their
and given that there's 5 people for them,
the city,
right? And given that there's 5 other citizens here, who are they extracting money from? What is the economic basis of these 2 criminal organizations?
It's like,
well, it's all about controlling the silk trade, but who's coming to the silk trade?
Well, we do see who do we see making silk? Don't we see a person making silk? At one point,
there's the silk merchant. Doing silk. There is a silk merchant.
Yeah. No, but I swear to God, we see somebody using a
loom.
Yes. Don't we see a woman using a loom at one point?
I think we might.
Complaining.
maybe.
I didn't see. There's no scene of. There's no. If we did, Toshiro Mifune probably isn't rubbing his stubble jaw from inside his kimono, so I wasn't paying attention. So speaking of going back to cultural impacts, holy moly, Toshiro Mifune sure as shit loves to rub his stubble jaw with his arm inside his kimono in this film, which is a Toshiro Mifune trademark. Which anytime I let my stubble get out, I curse my fate that I don't own a kimono to put on and then put my arm inside of, so that I can sit down and go and rub my stubble jaw.
Start carrying your arms inside all of your shirts.
Yeah, right. Just purely for stubble jaw rubbing, because that's essentially the Yojimbo character has got to be in the top 10, if not top 5 most iconic characters in cinema for a slew of reasons that are largely down to Toshiro Mifune is an exceptional character actor who perfectly nails this guy just being constantly fed up with everyone while constantly scheming how to eke out a few more coins, as symbolized by constantly rubbing his double jaw.
I love that Belushi's sort of parody on SNL of the samurai characters, obviously very clearly
it's
Yojimbo,
just Toshiro Mifune.
But not even like a parody of him. It's just Yojimbo in a different setting. He does a pitch perfect impression of him, and it's really just the fact that this character in a different setting is so funny.
Well, this character is kind of funny in his own setting.
Well, yeah, this character is funny in his own setting.
He is ridiculous, and you're very clearly supposed to read him as ridiculous.
He's
over the top enough to be funny.
He's constantly portrayed as being extremely world weary, but he's not allowed to be world weary because he is himself putting himself into all of these situations.
Right, he does everything to himself, I think that's part of the comedy of itself. Is he goes yeah, guess I'm gonna go help these guys out. Gosh darn it! And
he's perpetually put upon, but he's put upon by inserting himself into these situations for profit.
Yeah. Well, and then but the weird thing is
but randomly finding those situations still, because we're introduced with him. He tosses the stick in the air and just goes the way it points.
I really would have it's only the 2 movies, but I could have put up with 5, 6 of these.
Well, there was the somewhat non-canonical Yojimbo meets Zatoichi some years later.
Just saying, he could have.
There was technically a third entry in the Yojimbo.
Really?
In the Yojimbo, it was a crossover between Yojimbo and the Zatoichi films, which are obviously there's 16 of those. But I'd be interested to see, because I don't think he'd done too many big ones before this. Obviously, Toshiro Mifune plays lone wandering samurai characters a lot more after this, all of whom perpetually have their arms inside their sleeves and occasionally rub their stubble jaws. But I wonder, Seven Samurai came first, didn't it? I want to say it did.
I don't know. I don't remember the order.
Because
I was wondering the same thing. And
he obviously plays such a wildly different.
I feel like Seven Samurai, I think, was the late 50s.
I think it came first.
Yeah, if Seven Samurai
was 54.
That makes sense. Yeah,
he plays such a different character in Seven Samurai from what he essentially goes on to play some variation of for the majority of his, period film career. He only plays comic relief asshole that he's, totally incompetent at everything essentially in Seven Samurai, and for the rest, the majority of his films, he plays some variation on Yojimbo. Master swordsman, competent, that kind of thing. He only really plays against that type, as far as I can think of off the top of my head, in Seven Samurai, and I could be wrong on that, but that's the only one. It's the only one that springs to mind is his role in Seven Samurai.
Well, and that makes sense that would be his first one when he's getting into this thing, this class of film, and then from then on he just rides the Yojimbo chin rubbing train for the rest of his career. I would too.
Not the rest of his career though, because he was. It was this, then Sanjuro, and then High and Low.
And then he played
Does he rub
Yamamoto
chin in High and Low? That's a good question. His arms are not in his shirt, but does he rub a stubble chin?
No, he's clean shaven.
No,
he's clean shaven.
He's
the
never
whole
stubbled.
Time?
Yeah.
No, we
almost.
see him shave one time though. He had to be stubbled before.
Oh, you're
that.
right. He doesn't actually have to be stubbled to shave. He's a Japanese businessman.
I'm guessing he was stubbled.
Maybe a little bit.
Just because shaving in a movie without having stubble before you shave is the visual equivalent of watching a man take a shit.
That's
You don't.
I don't know if it's
I don't know.
No,
if I'm gonna
because
go
you
with you on that
don't. You
one,
don't know
Pat.
because
I don't
you
know
get
if I
nothing
can
out
in
of
good
it.
conscience.
No, okay. You follow my train of logic and you'll see it.
I don't think there's one. That's my point.
No, there is because a man in a movie shaves to show a change of philosophy or character.
Or
Yeah.
beard growth.
If you have a guy shave because it's a daily routine, you might as well show him do his other bodily functions because it doesn't mean anything. You only have them shave to show that something is changing.
Okay.
Right? You don't watch a
Okay.
character pee,
well,
but he probably did it at
I
some
don't know
point
if
during
you've
the
seen
movie.
how many like Stanley Kubrick films you've seen. But
Well,
sometimes
you usually don't watch a character pee for no
it gets
reason.
kind of grody, but
But you know
Point
what I'm
taken.
saying. Like so, they shave because they want the director wants to show you something about that character, about some change in their life or condition. And so, if he had stubble, if he shaved in High and Low, which I think he did, he probably had stubble before, and it shows that he is preparing for action or something along those lines.
He's preparing to accept the fact that he needs to pay the money.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's some change in personality
right.
or decision making. Yep, there you go. Hi. Yeah,
There we
I
go.
win.
There's-
Fine.
A
You win.
character shaving
Okay,
without
Pat,
stubble
you win.
is stubble is taking a shit.
there you go. That's
All right.
This is Critical Cinema Insights. Pat Dorgan.
Yeah.
You can only get
You'll
these
read
here
this
on Lost in
30
Criterion.
years from now, you'll read that in like some bad cinema book. And you'll be
Mark-
like, oh my
so.
god.
Mark Kermode's new theory.
No. 30 years from now, you'll read that in our bad cinema book when we think, well, we should probably do
Hey,
something. with the
Kickstarter's
fact
a
that we
thing.
watched
Let's
so
make a
many of
book.
these movies. So look forward to that.
30 years from now.
Self-published on Amazon.
30 years from now.
30 years from now.
Bye. soon.
Self-published on Amazon and then immediately delisted from Amazon by popular complaint.
For excessive use of shit as a metaphor.
Shit Metaphors and Kurosawa by Pat Dorgan
Yes, there you go.
was delisted twice.
He just keeps
Anyway.
submitting it. He
Yeah,
moves the commas around and then
Amazon
resubmits it.
filed a suit to enjoin Pat Dorgan from ever republishing his book on Amazon for the third time today.
Third time today.
Yeah, I want to know where the comma is in that sentence.
So, anyway, Yojimbo, it's one of those things that in some ways, while being extremely iconic of its time, when you watch it now, you kind of don't understand where outside of the gun-toting other bodyguard, you don't understand where the complete incompetency and impotency of these two criminal organizations would never fly in modern cinema as a antagonist of any sort.
But in
They
a
are not
comedy
nearly
action film, it
dangerous
totally
or
would.
slick enough to get a modern cinema audience
But
invested in them as anything
Well-
resembling a...
Yeah.
well,
Right.
two responses to that. First of all, I've never seen Yojimbo until today. Okay, well, yesterday
Really?
when I watched it. Yeah, I'd never seen it, and I was totally invested right from the beginning.
It's
As
an
a modern film goer, I was totally into it. I was like,
What
"Man,
about-
this is
what
so
about-
enjoyable."
These two brainless groups who he clearly demonstrate his ability to kill at whim with zero consequence or threat to his own person made you convinced that they were in any way, shape, or form a danger to the main character.
Well, no. It's not the well, first of all, it would fly in any comedy action film. These groups would do fine. This is a comedy action. Or an action comedy, whichever
Under that
order you
context,
want to
yeah,
put.
I guess I would
It is
grant you that.
definitely an action comedy film. This is not a straight action film.
The only
Seven
time
Samurai
they
is
have
an
to bring
action
the
film.
guy with the gun anytime they want to confront him, is my point.
Right.
They have to bring the only guy who is actually
Well,
remotely
they
a threat to
do,
him.
Yeah,
Yeah, but he does serve to legitimize the threat they pose. Yeah, it's only one guy, but they still
It's a gun. He's the
could
he's
hurt.
the guy with the
Yeah.
gun. And
But
the gun
thing is that like
nemesis
if you
to
look at
Yojimbo.
other action films, I want you to take a moment and we'll use the same film we've been using a lot, and look at Star Wars.
Okay.
Okay? Put any main character versus 100 stormtroopers. Who is going to win? You have to bring out the dude with the lightsaber to make any sort of dramatic impact.
Your point is,
you have to
invincibility outside of
game
pre-recorded nemesis characters is a trope in films. Got it.
Well, it's a trope, and it's something you absolutely need.
I think the problem here is that even the so-called leaders of these organizations
are themselves
are also not intimidating at all. But I like
are not intimidating at all.
I kind of like the fact that there's just these two greedy, total incompetent jerks who both want to take over this town, and are both
who want to take over this town that's one street.
Well,
it's really
and has four people living in it, none of whom care about their
that's
game.
Beyond the point. The point is that they're both equally incompetent, and therefore, they do pose a threat to each other, just not to Sanjuro.
They pose a perpetual. That's the whole reason they hire him. Is sort of to your point that they are so equally matched in incompetency that there has been a perpetual.
Right,
stalemate, which the rest of the people in this town are grumbling about.
And it would have been tipped the other way if the guy with the gun had come back. Without Sandro being there, it would have just been like, oh, the guy with the gun auto wins. Like default win. Like, and so the thing about it is it's not that, to me, that doesn't bother me. The fact that the bad guys are incompetent is par for the course in action comedy. It's just like, oh, look at these two idiots who can't do anything and yet can still make hell for the good guy by bumbling into ways to make his life a problem. Which they kind of do, right? Like, I mean, his life is not necessarily, he doesn't just walk in, beat up everybody and walk out. He does kind of beat up some people that way, but in the end, like, things just keep happening that stop him from doing it, which are not necessarily directly connected to the bad guys, but still fall into that bumbling bad guy universe of, like, incompetently lucky and stuff like that. And so I feel like I feel like those characters don't feel out of place in this film.
I think you see subsequent films usually at least up the ante on the villain threat quotient.
Right,
certainly the Clint Eastwood trilogy that is spawned from this, the bad guys generally pose more of a threat. That is in part, I think that's partly because guns are the big skill gap equalizer, so there's not as much. It's clear after the opening scene that nobody in this town poses any threat to him because the gap in skill, the swordsman, the gap in skill in their swordsmanship is so comically gigantic that none of these guys could ever hope to touch him. Whereas a gun, even an idiot can kill Clint Eastwood if he gets a shot off.
Even a fistful of dollars, they try to establish a disparity because in the final scenes where his guy with the gun is a guy with a rifle, whereas he has a handgun.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is that most of the time
that's why he needs to protect himself with the metal plate.
Well, and that's what I'm saying about this, like. I don't think the bad guys become more competent. Their guns just get bigger.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at these movies, even regular action films, I want you to take a moment and think about Die Hard.
I do this all the time.
Insert any Die Hard.
I'm already doing it.
And you're already dealing with a man who has an insanely incompetently stupid plan that relies on everything going perfectly, despite that's not the nature of the world.
Pat, if you don't stop talking shit about Hans Gruber, I'm going to come over to Japan and kill you.
Right. But you see what I'm saying? He is almost laughable. If it were an action comedy.
He's not. That's the point, is he's not incompetent. He's super competent. His plan does go off. He has this cockamamie ridiculous scheme that goes off without a hitch, including manipulating the FBI into doing exactly what he wants.
Making an incompetent plan, or making a stupid plan, cockamamie scheme, is incompetence.
But it was super competent because it all worked. But for John McClane, he would have gotten away with it. You do not get the impression that but for Yojimbo, they would have, like, Yojimbo, they would have been bumbling around
have
to this
remained
day.
in parallel.
But that's
forever.
the problem with modern action movies. Even the first J.J. Abrams Star Wars, Star Trek. I'm sorry.
Probably the first J.J. Abrams Star Wars will have the same problem.
Probably. I mean, we get all this.
He's a bad director. Anyone listening to this podcast,
the entire plan hinges on knowing things that are certainly going to happen that can't
possibly be known.
Can't possibly be known. Like
Adam, I think your problem is you're not enjoying the mystery, man. It's the it's the fact that I don't have a plot that is the plot. I'm J.J. Abrams. Hello, everyone.
Getting stranded on a snow-covered planet so that you can watch your home planet be destroyed, but this other guy shows up just in time to be a day's walking distance from the only outpost on an entire planet. It's just there's a lot of and all of that has to happen in order for the plan to work out. But at least Hans Gruber has some amount of control in his knowledge of how the police are going to react to the situation.
Well, but
it is a problem. These guys just clearly don't have
a plan.
They don't have a plan.
They can't, even when they manage to get to the point where they are all in the street together, ready to throw down. They clearly can't even just take that final step and attack one another, which the film repeatedly demonstrates.
They're all super cautious.
Are we supposed repeatedly? But at the same time, that makes them more believable to me than hyper competent super planner from Planetathon or something like that. Like
these guys are believable bad guys.
Yeah, that's my point. These guys are idiots, and they are totally believable in their idiocy. And the fact of the matter is Sanjuro is kind of hyper competent, but doesn't have to be hyper competent to tip the scales.
He wouldn't have to be as good as he is to beat these guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is like he, as a guy who is not a complete moron, is the only technical requirement he needs.
Do we ever see him and the other bodyguard cross blades, or is it always just the gun?
It's always the gun. It's always the gun.
Okay, because I think that's always something that is I think really interesting. Is they have this other guy who's, reputed to be a badass, but really he just has a gun, which means he gets an automatic plus 10 against
right to badassery. But
so
the thing is like when he's described by the food stall guy, he doesn't describe him as badass in the sense that like he is ultra competent. He describes him as being the one who cares the least.
Yeah, he is supremely callous.
And that makes him a badass because he's the guy who brings a gun to a knife fight.
Right. It's the same actor in Sanjuro, right? Who plays the...
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that guy...
Is it? I didn't even pay attention.
It is. He shows up in a ton of Nemesis roles and then eventually got some Yojimbo-esque starring Ronin roles himself.
He plays a good counterpoint.
I can't wait till we get to Sword of Doom, which could be years from now, but that is my all-time favorite.
The year 2025.
Yeah, that is probably my all-time favorite film with this guy, which is one, like the ending of that film is sort of the in some bizarre way is the continuation of the character here that he plays. Like, it is essentially, while obviously not that literal character, it is that character's, inevitable. Let's assume he never came to this town and was just a wandering serial murderer, basically. It is that guy's inevitable decline into total psychological breakdown and madness. I'm
excited for it.
Yeah, it is. Hence the title. It has a very famous ending of it's just him going totally batshit in a burning building, like killing everybody that is trying to stop him from losing his mind as they come close to him, and then it just ends like with him in mid slash against the camera. Sort of a spoiler for Sword of Doom here, but
hopefully everybody will forget.
You're welcome. Which is my point is that like you don't. His character here, you don't. That's why I was curious. I couldn't really remember if you actually ever see him.
No, you never see him throw a sword. You see him point a sword at a. No, that's in Sanjuro.
Yeah,
you never see him wield a sword.
You never see him. It's all about the gun. It's all about that is his big.
But that's the thing is like that. It's like who. It kind of points that thing where like okay, so if we look at modern action movies, we up the ante by making our bad guys hyper competent, right? We keep
they've hacked our IPs. They're inside the
firewall.
But like
you see what I'm saying, right? Because like okay, you need to create a a difference between the normal guys that the bad guy, that the good guy just plows through by the hundreds, and your ultimate bad guys, right? So normally in modern action movies, we do that by making the main bad guy hyper competent, or alternatively super powerful, right? In some other way, assuming that hyper competence is a form of superpower, right? Whereas, in this film we're doing the same thing, because the main bad guys are not really the main bad guys. Our main bad guy is the nemesis that we've already talked about, and he ups the ante and makes himself separate from the guys that the main character plows through by upping the power ante, the same as any other movie would. Whenever, like I said, you pull out the lightsaber instead of a whole bunch of blasters that can't hit anything except for bulkheads.
Right.
Okay? It's the same system. It's up the ante via power, because you have to do that, right? Otherwise, it's just wave after wave of guy falling to the sword, right? For the rest of the film until everybody in town is dead.
It's sort of bizarre in this respect. Now, speaking of, the incompetency of General Henchmen, that Star Wars, the original Star Wars, opens with a display of competence by stormtroopers in which they do storm a ship. There's the big boarding scene, they are trading shots and hitting people. And then for the rest of every movie, forever, outside of the opening 10 minutes of the first one, they can't hit anything.
But in the opening scene, they're not up against heroes.
I understand
that's the
that,
thing.
but that's always my point.
It's the thing you see literally written out in, for example, an RPG book is like, you're a hero, therefore everybody is laughable compared to you, kind of thing. And so that scale has to be maintained. Otherwise, you're not a hero. You're just a dude who gets shot really easy. You're that guy with a cool chin strap, with the helmet, crouching down behind the bulkhead, going, "Dear God, I hope I don't die."
And then they all died.
Yeah, and then you die.
So there's not really that. That, at least, I think in some respects sets a tone that these guys could be dangerous. We ultimately find out that if you're Luke Skywalker, they are not. But
right.
I take it back. As a quasi counterpoint, they do shoot Leia in the arm in Return of the Jedi.
Okay,
so
yeah, good point.
That's true.
She gets pieced, and granted, it is purely so they can set up her suite shooting them back, and her and Han Solo making googly eyes at each other while she does it, which in some ways is incredibly sociopathic, but
not in some ways, in most ways,
staggeringly sociopathic in some ways, that they're like, "I love you," and then they murder a bunch of people.
Well, and that's what.
So, notwithstanding that, there's not that same setup of.
Right, okay.
Of holy moly, these guys are really dangerous. They are never presented as anything other than flabbergastingly
That's true.
incompetent.
And maybe that's something the movie kind of needs, is a 1 minute montage at the beginning of these guys, like, mowing people down or something like that.
Is it that way in Fistful of Dollars, or the man?
I can't remember.
But
I think the fact that they've already taken over the city
is supposed to read
imply
like
to
they
us
obviously are at least good enough to do this.
Well, there was only 6 unarmed civilians. In some ways, even that hints that they are desperately incompetent, and that if they were ever faced with a real
but then
challenge...
later on, we see them beat the living crap out of Sandro.
Well, after he's already been captured and disarmed.
Right, but that implies at least the big guy who carries around the big hammer,
the war hammer. Yes.
He is at least competent in beating the crap out of people. So you can kind of understand that despite leadership being crap, these guys are at least a match for people.
An unarmed man.
Yeah, unarmed men, right? Which is all you need to be to take over a town full of unarmed men.
I suppose you're onto something there.
Right? It's when you insert guy with sword who can actually use it that they become incompetent. In the beating people up department, not in the planning department. They're obviously bad planners, okay? Right from the beginning.
I do like the fact that the most extended scene of violence in this is when he's destroying a house instead of destroying people.
Which is a great... it's a great scene anyway. Just watching him go apeshit on a house.
Yeah, there is that really great scene where he dispenses with the guards in 2 seconds, and then
we watch him spend 5 minutes.
And then for an hour, it's just him like a crazy person, just wailing on support beams and walls and everything. And I feel like that had to have been one of the most fun scenes to be on the set for. Is noted Japanese, very stoic actor Toshiro Mifune behaving like a effing crazy person.
Yeah,
like in for the same reason that, from what I have heard, the scene of Saruman and Gandalf fighting in the Fellowship of the Ring was they had to edit out everyone laughing because that was really them. And it was just two old guys hurling themselves to the ground and making noises at each other, which in a vacuum, like without the dramatic soundtrack and all the visual
Green
effects,
screen,
I'll bet was fucking hilarious.
Definitely.
It's these two like really like Shakespearean elderly men just trashing themselves physically. I mean, some stunt doubles for the really heavy stuff, but a lot of the just like hurling themselves to the floor and stuff was apparently really them, while making their
old men falling down.
Old men falling down and like crying out made up magic words at each other, which I'll bet there's no way that wasn't positively hysterical when you're on the set and it's just like dead silence except for them making these noises and doing these things.
Like it's funny to me how they set up that set too. Like they needed him to go batshit, right? And so the set is just full of things to knock down.
Yeah.
It's like overly abundant full of things that can be chopped up and like thrown and like knocked to the ground. It's like, who built this house and just put hundreds of bamboo poles just suspended from the ceiling everywhere?
Why would you? Who stockpiles bamboo poles in their ceiling amongst other things?
You can just go outside and chop it down. It's literally outside your front door. Why do you need hundreds of them?
The scene in Sanjuro you never see, or Yojimbo, is some guy comes to his house and immediately falls to his knees and cries out in anguish, "My bamboo pole stockpile!" Like,
and then the scene you also don't see
my life's work.
Is the 5 minutes before it, where it's like, "Bamboo man here. Who needs bamboo poles?" And like selling them to people. I need 20. Give me 20.
I will take all your bamboo poles. I've got a thing in my ceiling.
Yeah, I've got to do a thing next week.
Well, no, that's how bad these bad guys are. They stole all his bamboo poles because he was selling them, so clearly they have worth.
right. Oh God, don't take my bamboo. So we should probably end sometime soon.
Yeah.
We've basically said that this movie is awesome, right? Everybody should watch it.
It's a great movie. It's very clearly influential and very, very clearly known why. Obviously remade as Fistful of Dollars. Also remade as The Last Man Standing, starring Bruce Willis as a gangster during the Prohibition. Guess which one's the better movie?
Last Man Standing.
Probably.
It's not the gangster one. Sorry, you were wrong.
It's probably not the one with Bruce Willis. That's not it. You're saying
what about Fistful of
actually,
Dollars?
that one.
You're saying seminal Clint Eastwood spaghetti western. In fact, probably the spaghetti western that everyone's most familiar with.
Actually, on that note,
which is, I guess, this is a point as any is. Yeah, this is yet another in a long string of Kurosawa movies that were shot for shot remade as spaghetti western starring Clint Eastwood. Yeah. The Seven Samurai infamously remade as Magnificent Seven. Yojimbo remade and then extrapolated on with two sequels that were not interesting. Yeah, which are not. The second film in the Man with No Name trilogy is not a remake of Sanjuro, interestingly enough, which you'd think it might be, but no, they kind of just go off with their other two movies that don't that are not related to the
here's
Sanjuro
the thing, they got sued.
myth.
They got sued by Kurosawa for A Fistful of Dollars.
Did they?
It actually it led to a.
Did he sue them over Magnificent Seven?
Nah, I don't know about Magnificent Seven, but Fistful of Dollars there was definitely a lawsuit over, and it actually delayed the release of A Fistful of Dollars for a few years. But yeah, so the character was very popular because obviously he's going to be. They made sequels to Yojimbo. Might as well make sequels to his Western XP.
Right.
But yeah, they
tragically there was also not a Western remake of Yojimbo meets Zatoichi.
Sure?
Although lacking a blind masseuse gambling swordsman character archetype that easily translates to Western audiences, one might see where you'd have trouble making that.
No, this movie is, and like we've named some like basic remakes, but this film, the story and archetypes are just show up
aspects of this film's
every movie you
story.
watch.
Yeah,
have you seen
the
an
plot
action comedy
architecture
film?
And the character archetype in particular of this film are probably underpinning at least.
Easily. If you've seen an action film made since
years.
1965, you've seen at least some of Yojimbo.
in many ways, if you've seen a film in which a supremely martially skilled guy single-handedly dispatches 6 or 7 other people in 2 seconds without breaking a sweat, you are in some ways seeing a replay of the opening scene of Yojimbo.
That character also has to have, he has to have some sort of his own moral issues. Because otherwise we're your classic white hat, and that exists throughout eternity.
Right.
But this guy,
we're talking a morally conflicted,
gruff mercenary.
Yeah.
Morally conflicted. Well, gruff mercenary who sort of lazily and grumblingly gets forced into having a heart of gold. Who complains about having to behave morally and nobly while he's doing it. Is also obviously something that has been transplanted, remixed, spun on and utilized at nauseum by the rest of cinema forever.
Yes.
So speaking of
also,
that,
and by extension,
this summer, no.
And by extension, books, graphic novels.
But though I like to believe that this character archetype,
Yojimbo is one of those things that
new to the world of writing. At the time that this movie comes out,
to be sure, the super skilled swordsman that ices 20 people and the gruff mercenary with a heart of gold weren't novel to Kurosawa, but his
that's what I'm saying.
Take
he
on
definitely
them and
influenced
his
cinema and subsequent books and media. But he's not the guy who invented this archetype for sure.
He did not invent them, and in many ways it was a lot of what made Yojimbo, in my opinion, sort of unique given the period of filmmaking, especially period filmmaking that this came out in, has subsequently been lost. The part where part of the inverted social critique of Yojimbo was spitting on the samurai myth and showing that they were human and fallible and oftentimes terrible people. That part of the Yojimbo character is usually not part and parcel.
That's
that
true.
social critique
that is
underlying it is often not part of. He is not a glorious character. He is a character who is himself a walking critique of the, popular conception of the samurai, which had been a big part of films at that point. Because there's the whole historical context of it was the post-war period. Japan wanted to Japan had made a lot of films.
Image of Japan and Japanese.
Yeah, so Japan had gone back to the samurai period and made a lot of big sweeping, the Musashi films that we talked about. A lot of films that, are these grand sweeping noble portrayals of the samurai, and Kurosawa and a lot of his contemporaries, Sword of Doom, which we'll get to being another, if anything, really grim example of this, had kind of a pushback on that with a lot of films that were period dramas, but were a lot more gritty and morally complex and reminded people that these were human beings and were not 100% pure-hearted, noble people. There was a horrible caste system, which came with its own terrifying social politics that was an irretrievable, inseparable part of the samurai era. And all of these things that Yojimbo is designed to critique and push back on, and obviously that is essential to the film and the character, but that part of that mythos,
right? It doesn't necessarily translate outside of the period piece.
Even as right, it doesn't. But I think it's what makes Yojimbo, what makes the original
really, really good. Yeah,
still special. Yeah, it's something that's lost even as immediately as the Fistful of Dollars.
You're lacking that.
That guy is not. That guy is he is a glorification of the wandering cowboy, not a pushback, not a deconstruction of the myth to show that, in fact, they were assholes. He is lauded for being. We like him because he's an asshole. And while we like Yojimbo for being an asshole, he fulfills a dual role.
But at the same time, we don't necessarily like his assholeness. We're not really meant to think this guy's the greatest human being. We're supposed to be like, wow, what a great swordsman.
We are definitely...
But, dude, this guy's a jerk.
We're supposed to have conflicting appraisals of Yojimbo. We are supposed to find him a flawed character. You are not supposed to find the Yojimbo archetype in most of the ways
you're not
that
supposed
it
to think like,
he's portrayed. You are not supposed to think that he is a flawed that he is a, inverse of something, that he is a deconstruction of a myth. Right. He is the myth. It went from being a deconstruction of the myth to becoming its own myth, which is the thing that has then subsequently been in every single
action movie,
comic, video game, and film, action, anything for the rest of time, was the myth itself, rather than the fact that it actually started out as a pushback deconstruction of an existing myth.
Mm-hmm.
So
there you go.
That's the Donovan had a fucked up childhood tangent about, because Dad explained all this to me at an age in which I was like, Dad, I'm fucking 10. I don't care about Japanese cultural cinematic pushback periods. Anyway. I want to go outside and play with Nerf guns. I don't give a shit about Japanese cinematic culture wars of the 60s.
And yet here it is paying off.
And yet here it is. It's come. Thank God I had it, because now I can be on this podcast and everything's come full circle. Or
Hooray!
Something.
Hey, speaking of full circle, real quick.
Yeah. So we should go to the next movie.
I wanna end this real on another circle. And it involves Star Wars again. The original novel this is based on is about a detective. Actually, it's more of a gangster novel, but it's called Red Harvest, and Lucas filming Star Wars under Blue Harvest was a reference to that as well.
Interesting.
And isn't that fun?
Huh. That is fun, actually.
George Lucas, probably a hack, even from the earliest days.
Thank you for listening to Lost in Criterion. Next week, we'll be talking about Sanjuro, the spiritual successor, if not arguably outright sequel to this. Yeah,
it is a
sequel. Let's
not even say
in some respects, we don't get a sense of time, so we don't know if it's a sequel, a prequel, or
there's no timeline.
Anyway,
subsequent films starring the same character, which are not necessarily directly sequential to one another whatsoever.
Yes. Anyway, that's next week, and thank you for listening. We'll see you then.
Yep, see you next time.
You've been listening to Lost in Criterion, a production of With Two Brains. The show is hosted by Adam Glass and John Patrick Owatari Dorgan. Jonathan Hape did the music, and Adam Glass also edited it all together. Feel free to contact us by email via lostincriterion@withtwobrains.com, or join us on the web at www